moving a little bit higher above the space station's orbit and moving away from it. Then, as we were talking about earlier, because of orbital mechanics, going into a higher orbit and the sort of interaction between centripetal force and gravitational force, spacecraft that are further out will go slower on their orbits. So as we go into a higher orbit, represented as the sort of the up-down direction on this photo, we'll end up falling behind the International Space Station at the time that we perform departure burn 2. Now, departure burn 2, we're actually reducing the overall apogee and perigee of the spacecraft to get into a point where we're about 10 kilometers below the space station. And again, because of how speeds in ellipses around orbits work, we'll end up speeding up and sort of moving ahead of the space station. Finally, there is shown the departure phasing burn. So what those two burns are showing, and you can actually kind of tell from the dashed line there, is just trying to show that the apogee and perigee of Dragon over time is moving up and down until we actually do that final deorbit burn. And that deorbit burn isn't actually a direct drop into the atmosphere, but it puts us onto an ellipse that will land us close to our targeted landing site near Pensacola, Florida. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an explainer of how to interpret these charts. I know the first time I saw one of these in my own training, I had no idea how to read it. And so the departure phasing burn is expected for later today. That'll be actually a pretty long burn, lasting about 6 minutes. That's expected to happen around 5:48 a.m. UTC at around 10:48 p.m. Pacific time. That'll be the last major burn for tonight. Will actually come while Bob and Doug are getting some rest in the Dragon spacecraft.
And if you're just joining us, that is along the lines of what they're getting the opportunity to do now. As Dragon is fully autonomous, they are just monitoring the mission. They are outside of their suits and able to float around the cabin. They were taking some pictures outside the window earlier. The astronauts are well on their way home after a successful undocking and departure earlier today. We saw that departure happen on time, with separation occurring at 4:35 p.m. Pacific, 11:35 p.m. GMT, the time that we use aboard the International Space Station. And that was farewell from 63 days aboard the International Space Station for Crew Dragon, undocking from the Node 2 forward port and beginning its journey home.
With that, just a couple more departure burns, or excuse me, just the phasing burn to go for today. Finish those burns with the Draco thrusters, the forward bulkhead thrusters, that get us into our right co-elliptical orbits, which will then put us in the right opportunity for those landing sites in the Gulf of Mexico. And of course, the ground teams and the recovery teams have been monitoring the weather out there with Hurricane Isaias. Luckily, the hurricane moving away from the intended landing sites, leaving some pretty nice weather. The weather teams, really the recovery teams, monitoring the surface wave heights, the slope of those waves, and including the wind speeds as well as rain and lightning strikes in the area. All things that would reduce the likelihood of a successful recovery of the vehicle. So far, weather is looking nice and clear, everything well within margins and the flight rules for recovery.
And currently inside the Dragon capsule are Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. Coming up next for them in about 30 minutes will be their crew pre-sleep time period. That means they'll get the chance to relax, conduct any of the last activities they want to do before time for them to get a little sleep. We're looking at about an 8-hour sleep period for them tonight. And it'll be after they go to sleep tonight that phasing burn will be conducted. As we mentioned earlier, this is a fully autonomous vehicle, so the crew doesn't need to be awake to press any buttons and send that command. The vehicle will conduct it on its own. It's pre-programmed into Crew Dragon, so hopefully they sleep right through it.
As they go through different time zones.
Actually, that's a great capability to have on the vehicle that allows them to get synced up with the events for tomorrow, because the spacecraft can handle those steps automatically. And really the ground teams as well don't really have that much by way of actions that they need to perform for those burn. We perform no-go, go, or go-no-go criteria evaluation of the spacecraft health and systems. But if the spacecraft is ready to perform the burn and we see no issue to stop the burn, Dragon will perform it automatically. Speaking of which, there's a view of mission control here in Hawthorne. In that room, a number of specialists who focus on the various different subsystems on the spacecraft, including folks who are focused on the health of the crew aboard. And then we've got a set of operators as well who are very familiar with all of the logistics of each phase of the mission. So the ship currently on, very familiar with proximity operations, both for docking and undocking operations. And we'll actually get a chance to see a shift handover to what's referred to as the phasing shift. That should happen around 9 p.m. Pacific time.
And then crash into the roof or something.
9 p.m. Pacific time, around 4 a.m. UTC tomorrow.
Keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. You can submit those on Twitter and tune into the broadcast to see if they are answered. We have one from Tony asking how long the other crew members will be at the International Space Station. So yes, our coverage tonight is focused on Bob Behnken.